Colonel Moore, thank you so much for being here. It is a privilege to have you visit here at WDD.
Well, thanks for the invite. I'm honored to be here and I appreciate your time.
So the whole country is dealing with this sequestration. It's about $85 billion in cuts across the board. And Delaware's share is about $18 million of that. And Dover Air Force Base also is taking a pretty hard blow. How significant are the cuts at Dover Air Force Base?
The cuts themselves, in terms of magnitude, are not substantial. What is a challenge is the way that they're applied. We don't have the ability to realign resources in order to cover priorities. Sequestration directs a 10% cut across the board in every non-exempted appropriation. So every category of spending has to take a 10% cut, and in the event that it's something that is a higher priority than another category, we don't have the ability to realign resources. One of the things that this will lead to, the most visible impact on our civilian workforce, is a furlough. So we expect that for 22 days from now until the end of the fiscal year, on 30 September, our civilians will be at home, not producing work and supporting the mission, and also not being paid. So this will be a substantial impact to them and their families. It's essentially a 20% cut in pay and a 20% cut in the man hours available for us to accomplish our mission. We will have to work through this, but I don't suspect that we'll be able to do it with zero impact. I suspect there'll be an impact on the mission, but we haven't yet quantified that.
Yeah, what are you expecting for operations? How is that going to change things? It's not just going to be one day a week everyone doesn't work and Dover Air Force Base shuts down, right?
Well, Dover Air Force Base never shuts down. We run the aerial port and the flight line and the air traffic control facility and the maintenance operations 24/7. So we will do everything we can to preserve every bit of mission capability that we have. We don't anticipate shutting the airfield down, but we will have to find ways to conserve the resource that we have left and apply it in such a way that we get as much of our job done as possible. There's not a way to send 700 people home for 20% of their work week and not have an impact.
And so have you determined how many flights are going to be changed or how many hours in the air is going to be reduced? Are we looking at specific numbers at this point, or is it too soon to tell?
It's too soon for us to tell. I hope that we'll be able to quantify that in the near term, but as yet we haven't reached a specific target on how that'll be impacted. I can tell you that the operational flying that we do in support of the war, we will continue to do that. Mm-hmm. We'll continue to do as much training flying as we can to maintain the proficiency of our air crews, and we will continue to maintain the aircraft in accordance with all the technical orders and directives that we have to ensure that they're airworthy. But there will be probably some delays in the amount of time it takes to get that done. And I suspect that the services we offer to our airmen will be reduced. There's not a way for us not to do that. Mm-hmm. 20% cut in the work week of 700 people is going to matter.
Now, has that begun now, or is it yet to begun?
It hasn't begun yet. We anticipate the first pay period that will include furloughs starting on 21 April, and that should go until the pay period that ends on 21 September. Mm-hmm. That'll be 22 weeks, 1 day per week.
So what is being done in preparation of this? Are there informational sessions or programs being set up, or any kind of ways that when that day comes, you'll be ready for it?
Absolutely. Three important things. The first one is town hall meetings. I've hosted 3 so far. The fourth one will be this evening. And the effort is to provide direct information to the workers that are going to be impacted so they know exactly what we know. The guidance continues to mature, and so as it does, we continue to provide updates. But the most important thing in my mind is to provide upfront, honest information to our civilian employees so that they can plan for this. The second thing is negotiation with the unions. The unions that we have on base do a fantastic job of representing the equities of their civilian employees. We brought the unions in at a pre-decisional level so that they could help us craft this plan so that it would count for the quality of life of our workers while at the same time balancing mission requirements. And then third is developing the schedule that will actually allow us to implement this. And until the negotiations with the union are complete, we will not enter that phase, but I expect that will happen sometime this week. So hopefully we'll have the opportunity to provide all of our civilian workers at least 2 weeks' notice of any day that they're going to be furloughed. We still have not provided final notice of intent to furlough. As soon as that's released, our civilian workers will have the opportunity to comment on that, and then we'll implement following that.
So civilian workers are going to be impacted the most. Is that so? No active duty airmen are going to be affected by this.
Active duty airmen are not impacted by furlough. One of the impacts that we've just received that will be a substantial impact to our active duty airmen is a termination for the remainder of this year in tuition assistance. As you know, one of the things the military uses as a primary recruiting tool is educational opportunities. One of the ways we provide that opportunity to our active duty airmen is by providing tuition assistance. We pay for the majority of their college tuition. This includes airmen getting their 2- and their 4-year degrees, as well as graduate degrees, and officers earning their graduate degrees. Last year, nearly a third of our active duty airmen took tuition assistance, over 3,000 classes. That will stop effective this past Monday evening. So there will be no more tuition assistance for the remainder of this fiscal year. And that will put a stretch on the budgets of our airmen. They will have to find other alternatives for ways to continue their education. The Air Force values advanced academic degrees, continuing education. We will continue to value that, and we'll continue to find ways to get it done. But the cut in tuition assistance will be a very visible and very important impact on the lives of our airmen. About $2.3 million last year spent on tuition assistance just at Dover.
And not only in the short term, but in the long term, I'd imagine too, because if you've got people who, not only you're going to have people who are, finding other ways to fund their tuition, you're going to have people that just aren't going to find those ways and aren't going to get that education.
Absolutely, and that's a real concern. That's a real concern. And education, both on the officer and enlisted side, is a prerequisite for career advancement. It's that important to the Air Force. So this is a substantial impact to our airmen. The impact of sequestration to our civilian employees is about $5.2 million in salary that won't be paid between now and the end of the year. Tuition assistance alone for our airmen about $2.3 million.
And so are there construction projects or other kinds of spending on the base that are also being put on hold for right now?
There will be some of those. The only one that we're aware of so far is a 1-year slip in the construction of the new school. But I expect that there'll be some other delays. We have not seen those yet, but we are still working through what it will take for us to conserve the funds that we need to conserve to make our top line balance at the end of the year.
Now, with Dover Air Force Base, as I understand it, it takes about a quarter of the whole global transport mission of the Air Force. Is that correct?
We have about 20% of the
20%,
strategic airlift capability in Air Mobility Command. We have 31 airplanes at Dover. Last year, we moved about 249 million pounds of cargo. So a substantial portion of our nation's capability, but not quite a quarter.
But so what happens here is going to affect the entire capability of the Air Force.
It absolutely will, and what's happening here is happening everywhere else. In addition, this is not unique to Dover and certainly not unique to the Air Force. So the impacts are going to be far-ranging. You mentioned at the beginning, this is our United States government. This is not just the Department of Defense even. This is the whole of our government attempting to solve our fiscal problems.
And the U.S. military is drawing down Afghanistan as we speak. In Iraq, I think we've been drawing down for some years already. And I'm wondering if, with the likelihood of tighter budgets from Congress, you mentioned this earlier, that these kind of budget cuts are going to become a reality for Dover Air Force Base. Seeing this kind of really tight budget where you really have to scale back operations.
Well, certainly sequestration has already become a reality. How long it continues will be up to the President and the Congress. In the event that the President and the Congress are not able to come together and craft a solution, this will continue for 9 more years past this year. This is not something that ends at the end of this fiscal year. What happens to the rest of the defense budget, I certainly couldn't say, and how that would trickle all the way down to Dover Air Force Base would be anyone's guess. But I certainly think that as our country attempts to solve our fiscal problems, we'll see tighter budgets across the board. How that'll impact Dover, we'll have to wait and see.
Right. I mean, and when you took command of the base, did you imagine that these kind of budget issues were going to be some of your top challenges here?
I did not imagine sequestration actually occurring. Part of the message with sequestration was it was supposed to be so tragic and so draconian that it could never be allowed to occur. The fact that it has, I think, is unfortunate, and we will be impacted at Dover, we'll be impacted in the Air Force, and we'll be impacted in the Department of Defense because it's been allowed to occur.
And you've mentioned that the base has changed dramatically over the last 2 decades and is coming to the end of a 20-year plan. Could you talk a bit more about where we go from here? What is the plan for the future of the base?
You bet. It seems a little bit disingenuous to talk about these kinds of budget cuts in future planning, but we never stop planning for the future. The base has largely completed the 20-year plan in about the last 7 years. So we're undertaking a process now, a very disciplined approach to deciding what the future of the base ought to look like so that we can support future missions. It's important to note that this is not about building new buildings or constructing new facilities. This is about trading in old facilities that have reached the end of their life and whose cost of ownership is very high for facilities that can carry us and our mission and future missions well into the future. This is about maintaining the viability of Dover Air Force Base as the East Coast cargo hub for the foreseeable future.
And so, as you mentioned, this is the sequestration. This is just possibly, phase one of 10 phases over 9 years. So is that going to impact the way that the plans are made for the future of this base?
We will continue to plan and continue to ensure that we have the ability to guarantee the long-term viability of the base. How that plan gets executed is absolutely dependent on the budget and on the resources available. We'll have to see how that goes from year to year. But we will be ready in the event that the budget authority exists to modernize and continue to equip our base to remain the East Coast cargo hub.
Now, with technology, like with drones and whatnot, those have become vastly more popular in the last decade. Is there a point where they may be replacing what airmen do at Dover Air Force Base?
We already actually have some robotics that have taken the place of airmen. Our aerial port, for example, is largely automated. We have 2 electronic transfer vehicles that move pallets around all on their own. They store them in locations that the computer knows, and when we're ready to build a load plan, the electronic transfer vehicles pull those pallets and spit them out the back of the aerial port in a particular order so they can go on the aircraft. As far as replacing the pilots that are flying missions, I think that's a distinct possibility, but I think we're fairly far into the future before we're willing to put passengers on an aircraft without a pilot.
And those are pretty big planes, too, as opposed to more surveillance type drones.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else you'd like to add or comment on about the sequestration cuts and the challenges moving forward?
No, I certainly would hope that the President and the Congress will be able to come together and craft a solution that will prevent this from continuing. The impact on our airmen and our civilian workforce is substantial, and there will be an impact on our mission as well.
Colonel Moore, thank you very much for speaking with us.
Hey, thanks for your time. I hope to get the opportunity to come back and see you again.